Hi everybody, my name is Ben. I'm the one who writes the stuff for the whole dang thing, blogging through the Bible with irreverent reverence every day, most days. I try to do it. Anyway, thought I'd change it up today because Deuteronomy is getting really repetitive. It's kind of like reading the same chapter over and over and over again. So I thought I'd change up how I presented it to you by talking via video so you can all see my face and my somewhat Mark Driscoll-ish hair, maybe? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so I just want to tell you what I saw in Deuteronomy 11. That's what this is. Okay. I noticed it's kind of broken up into sections, each one starting with God reminding people, obey these commandments, which is a theme that has been happening all through Deuteronomy. So I thought it'd be interesting to look at what happens in each of those segments. What happens each time God says, obey these commandments. The first one is about what has happened. It's kind of their story, but particularly what has happened as God has punished or judged people, specifically the Egyptians, and then some Israelites back in Numbers 16. Pharaoh was destroyed by the Red Sea. The water came over him, it says. And then the Israelites were destroyed by the ground opening up and swallowing them, which I thought was interesting. Land and sea, I don't know if there's much significance in there, but there it is. Part 2, which I don't actually have verse numbers in my little binder, so you're just going to have to find it. Oops. Find it yourself. I believe you can because you're smart. So this one talks about the land they get into. What I thought was interesting about this description of the land is God compares it to Egypt. It says in Egypt, you had to sow your seeds and you had to do irrigation. But the land here, it's not so much like that. It's actually full of hills and valleys and it's watered by rain from the sky. It's a land that the Lord God looks after. So it actually sounds a lot like Eden in this place that God takes care of and just brings these people into and gives them this good thing. So I thought that was really interesting. So then part 3 happens right after that, where God says, if you only heed every commandment that I'm commanding you today. And this one talks a little bit more about the land. What's interesting is that it brings up the theme of you will be filled, like you'll have this good stuff if you obey me, you'll have lots of food. And then immediately after it talks about you will eat your fill, which happened before in one of the chapters. I wish I could remember which one. It says, take care or you will be seduced into turning away and serving other gods and worshiping them. So I think it's interesting that God, or Moses, I guess is the one who's saying this, sees a link with kind of having plenty and being full and then turning to idolatry. That is an idea I would really like to play with and figure out. And then actually does a repeat, kind of almost of the stuff that happens in Deuteronomy 6 after the Shema prayer. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but talking about, it's actually almost word for word. Put the words of your heart and soul, bind them on the side of your hand, fix them as an emblem on your forehead like the Karate Kid, teach them to your children, talk about them at home, when you're away, when you lie down, when you rise, put them on doorposts of your house. It's like everywhere you look, you're seeing the commands of God, which is, I thought it's really interesting. Then part 4. What does part 4 talks about? Oh, you obey God, that's going to help you get into this land that you're going to be talking about. God will drive out the nations before you. Part 5. This part is actually really cool. God ties with the blessing and the curse. He's going to bless you if you obey the commands. He's going to curse you if you don't. It's a very if-then world that Deuteronomy exists in. But that's interesting is when they enter the land, God says, you're going to put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal, that you know they are beyond the Jordan, some distance to the west, land of Canaan. So once they get into the land, once they've driven out some of the people who are there, they go to these mountains and actually put, I wonder if it's like a flag or a symbol or something that people can look up on the mountain and see, reminding them of the blessing. You obey God, you stay here, and then they look to another direction. This is where the curse is. And so I think it's interesting, even as God told them, bind it to your forehead, put on your hand, even they're supposed to make the world around them proclaim it. The mountains themselves, when you look at them, will say, obey God's command. I think that's so interesting. And the last cool part I saw is, so as you know, they are beyond the Jordan, some distance to the west, in the land of the Canaanites who live in Arabah, opposite Gilgal, beside the oak of Moreh. And I was like, oh, the oak of Moreh, that sounds familiar. And so a little cross-referencing, looking up. The oak of Moreh happens in Genesis 12, which is the first time we meet Abraham. And that's the first place Abraham encountered the Canaanites. And so it's interesting that we bring that back. And that's actually the place where God said, your descendants will inhabit this land. So lots of interesting stuff. It seems like each time there's a chapter, it takes the same themes and adds a little bit to them. Like this one, I think the real new part was putting the blessing and the curse on the mountains. And I think that's really, really interesting. Kind of like a Mount Rushmore type thing, maybe. Only hopefully less weird. Maybe just a big like flag. That would probably work fine. But yeah, so I'd be curious, like, what are your thoughts as you read Deuteronomy 11, or as you've been reading through Deuteronomy with me? Like, what are you seeing? What are you noticing? And is it, I don't know, is it speaking to you or changing you in any way? So that's my video blog for maybe a while. But I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for checking it out. Feel free to share this with your friends. More people reading it, the better. So, peace out.